everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to talk about OTAs, Wes. We got a chance to witness one practice this week. It was on Tuesday. Players were out in the field for about an hour and a half, maybe a little longer than that, hour 45, right in that range. I'll just throw it out to you open-ended. There's certainly coverage on our website. Maybe some of you have already seen the stories from Wednesday, Thursday, off of Tuesday afternoon's practice. But what was your number one top-ranked observation?
Everybody gets all fidgety and upset about people saying, hey, I'm in the best shape of my life. But I will say it's always interesting. 4 months is not that much time in the grand scheme of things from when the Packers season ended to where we are right now. But I always find it interesting when you look at guys like Carrington Valentine, when you look at Colby Wooden, even a guy like Christian Watson. Guys do look different when they come back because most of these guys, they are fully dedicating themselves to building up their bodies in those 3-4 months that they're away from this team.
And guys like that are also quite young. They're not
very young.
They're not fully formed professional athletes yet. We saw the same thing a decade ago with David Bakhtiari and guys like that who not just changed in terms of the way they played and how they, understood the game and all that, but their bodies physically change when they're within those first couple years of their pro career.
I even thought, you weren't in the scrum with me on Jordan Love, but I even thought Jordan, looked a little bit bigger, more toned, more of a man, so to speak. But be that as it may, I was super impressed by just the attention to detail with this football team coming back. Keyshawn Nixon kind of touched on it. A number of guys were talking about how when you look at the perfect attendance that they've pretty much had so far, the fact that the Packers got as close as they did last year to finally getting over the hump against the 49ers, I think that's fueling the veterans that are coming back, and you have a bunch of young, hungry players that are trying to fit into that mold as well. So it was one practice. They had many more that we were not privy to, that we did not see. But for it being the first time seeing the entire football team back together in 3.5 months, I was pretty impressed by what I saw. Yeah,
and I think when you talk about that vibe that's within the team and the hunger and the opportunity that these guys feel that's in front of them, in some ways it's amazing what 1 year of missing the playoffs does for veteran players. Because 2022 was a tremendous disappointment. The season was rough for a long way. Then the Packers got hot, started to make a run. Then they had that playoff berth in their grasp at home, chance to win and get in, and it got away from them. And for veteran players like a Keyshawn Nixon, guys like that, then when you do get to the playoffs like they did last year, you felt you were playing as well as anybody in the league, anybody that was in the playoffs and had a shot at this thing, and you don't quite get there. And, there's tremendous disappointment. There's tremendous regret. Yes, there's a lot of optimism and whatnot looking forward. But those opportunities like 2023, they sting even more when you're coming off of a season when you didn't make the playoffs the year before. So to me, what I sense is this is the veteran players in particular. These guys are taking nothing for granted in that they know the type of team that they have and what they might be able to accomplish. And they don't want to go down the road of a 2022 again. And they don't want to go down the road of the first half to 3/4 of 2023 when they were just trying to figure things out. They got things figured out at the end of last season. They know what they can be. They know what they can accomplish. And so it's like, hey, let's go. It's as though they feel like they could, head down to Brazil next week and play that week 1 game. Now, that's not how it works. Obviously, there's a ton of work to put in and everything to get ready for the season. But these guys, especially the veteran players, they know that there's an opportunity this year.
Yeah, and for this whole practice, again, and I was talking with Sean Ryan about this, some other guys, you don't have the pads on. You don't have the full contact element to this thing. It still is more that getting sort of acclimated, orientated to the new playbook and what exactly the assignments are going to be. But I felt overall there was a energy within that practice that to me was somewhat different than in the past. And the question was asked in Insider Inbox about, okay, like how different is the feel around the building this year compared to last year? Around the building, I actually don't think it's much different. I think people believed in Jordan Love. They certainly believed him as a person last year. I think there was a lot of guys that respected the way he handled himself as the backup to Aaron Rodgers. So when he got his opportunity, everybody wanted to go full tilt for him.
Yeah.
But now you have the excitement beyond this because you have the 459 snaps or whatever, or 549 snaps, whatever it was, or passes that Jordan Love threw last year. You have the touchdowns, you have the production, you have that late season rally, and I think that's pulling guys back together. In addition to the fact that a lot of these guys, Mike, that had some injury questions at the end of the season, you look at Kingsley Enagbare was out there. He didn't need a knee sleeve. He was good to go. Basically a full participant, I guess you would say. Christian Watson and Eric Stokes, we'll probably talk about that in a second, but both of those guys went down to UW-Madison with the Packers training staff, felt like they got some answers, maybe not to what will completely solve this thing, but at least to what's causing all this.
Yeah.
And now come back feeling more confident in their own bodies. And then certainly this team, I think there was one player that wasn't there because of a personal excused absence, but to have Jair Alexander working with Xavier McKinney and all these different individuals who are in this building and already starting to pull the wagon here for the Packers, as Matt LaFleur has said at several turns, when your quarterback's there, when your veterans are there, everybody follows.
Yeah, well, as far as what we saw on the field during the practice on Tuesday, I have to admit I was a little surprised, and we were probably a bit misleading to our regular viewers and listeners with Tuesday's show with regard to
old school,
maybe how some of these rookies were going to be fitting in, because the guys like Edgerrin Cooper and Javon Bullard on defense, they were not with the ones. The teams were when they went to 11 on 11, which was not run at full speed on Tuesday. It was more what they call teaching speed. But in the 11 on 11s, there was the first units on one side of the field and then the backup units on the other side of the field. And when it came to the ones versus ones, the rookies weren't out there. So we'll see what that means moving forward. And as far as where things go in training camp, I don't know if not doing that was because they want the rookies to sort of earn their stripes a little bit, or if it's because they would like to have the rookies actually working on the same unit together as they learn the defense together. There could be various reasons for it, and we're not really sure. And honestly, it's going to matter more in training camp than in OTAs anyway. But that being said, it was a little bit unexpected, at least to me, based on how the depth chart looked.
One thing to keep in mind, because I was talking to one of the beat writers already, and he shall remain nameless, good friend. It's Pete Doherty. But, he was asking me like some depth chart questions there, and I'm like, here's the thing about this, because I understand that's what fans think right away, depth charts. One thing that people have to understand is we're writing this content this week, the Packers did two-spot in Team 11 on 11. That's pretty unconventional for an OTA practice to have your ones on one end and your twos on another end. And I think that kind of impacted it as well, because I remember back when we were using the analogy of 2019, well, you had the reserves on offense and the reserves on defense on the sideline when they were doing the team 11 on 11 when Darnell Savage was on the back end with Adrian Amos. In this particular practice, it was very interesting what Green Bay did, because you had Edgerrin Cooper and Tyron Hopper over there with the ones, but then you had, in addition to the safeties over with the twos, or whatever you want to call it, you also had Corey Ballantyne and Carrington Ballantyne. Yeah. My goodness, I'm back to that again.
Yeah.
Over there working with the team too. So they kind of mix the personnel a little bit more than what you would expect, because I think they were just trying to get the reps in. And again, what happens today has no impact on what's going to happen next week or the week after. It's going to be about the Packers gathering their data, seeing who's healthy, when we'll talk about that too in a bit here as well. And then once you get into training camp, you get through those initial weeks, and then you start to see the shuffling happen. You see the guys rising a little bit, or the depth chart's kind of shifting. But right now, it's loose leaf paper, man. I mean, it's all recyclable.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I had said on our show earlier this week when we were sort of previewing the OTAs. As reporters, when we only get to see what's going on one day a week, you don't know if the next day everything is shuffled around in terms of who's lining up with whom and what unit and what the depth chart looks like. We'll get another day next week where we get to watch practice again, but there are practice days on either side of that day where we don't necessarily know what's going on out there. So all we can report on is what we observe. And nobody's going to necessarily explain, the day-to-day process and how they're going about it at this time of year, which is why you take it, you understand what you can, but you don't put too much into it. You've mentioned sort of the health update and the reports there. I do want to start with Kingsley Enagbare, because to see him out there with not a thing on that knee. I mean, this is basically 4 months since the injury, which was in the wild card game in Dallas to his knee, which was initially feared to be a torn ACL. Apparently it was not. He has avoided reconstructive surgery. But not only that, he's out there in OTAs and considered full go, according to Matt LaFleur. There's no restrictions, no limitations. He's got no kind of sleeve or brace or anything on that knee. I'm frankly kind of blown away by that, because even if he's able to avoid reconstructive surgery and the injury is not as bad as anyone thought, you would still think that here in OTAs and non-contact stuff that there'd be some limitations on him. And there aren't. He's good to go.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Davis still wasn't participating yet. He's almost a year out from his ACL. That's nothing against Tyler, but it just shows you the amount of caution they usually show at this time of the year with these guys. There wasn't that concern at all with Enagbare. And Michael, I'm telling you right now, I am not a doctor, but that ACL ligament in his knee must be a bungee cord. Because, I mean, the way we do our press conferences after the games is you're with the coach, you're with the quarterback. I'm in the locker room.
Right.
I will forever have that image of Kingsley with the towel over his head being extremely emotional around his teammates, which, as we found out later on, was after he'd been kind of told that, it's not looking so good here. They had to do their MRIs and stuff, but the initial tests weren't looking good.
Yeah.
That there might have been a tear there. And then we see him 2 weeks later, and he's walking around the locker room fine. And I remember saying to you, I'm like, I've never seen a guy with an ACL injury look that good walking around.
They're
just
on
in
a couple weeks.
They might be in a wheelchair. I mean, there's different, a scooter, and he looked great. And then here we are, last hurdle. First day of the offseason program. Evan Siegel goes down to the Hudson Center, takes the photos of the guys throwing the medicine ball around, for the phase 1 with the strength and conditioning staff. Enagbare's out there running around circles and stuff, and I'm trying to make sense of it, you never can be too sure. Obviously, it's not contact practice. And then there he is out there on the practice field. You feel so good for him from a personal perspective, because, dude, he was there when Rashawn Gary tore his ACL. He knows what it looks like when you have to make that rally back, not just the time that you miss, but everything that goes into actually rebuilding your knee.
Right.
And here he is. He's out there. Hopefully he continues to cross that. But the fact that the Packers allowed him, the trainers, the doctors allowed him to be out there on the field, that speaks volumes in terms of just what condition that knee is in right now.
Yeah, 100%. Well, the injury news wasn't all good, unfortunately, and we know that these are the kinds of things that we find out about this time of year. One, on the very minor side of things, free agent running back Josh Jacobs was not participating in the drills and the practice and everything on Tuesday. He has a hamstring injury, not considered serious by any means. Could be back out there by the end of OTAs or for the minicamp later. We'll see. He was all suited up and had his helmet and everything, looked like all the other players, but was not actually participating in the practice, was rehabbing off to the side.
If there's a hangnail on him right now, I don't necessarily
you protect him, as Ted Thompson used to say, just put bubble wrap on him, get ready for the season, because you're gonna be wanting a lot out of Josh Jacobs for 17 plus
He's still
games.
He's a young man, but he's already an all-pro. He's been a rushing champion. The Packers know what they have in him. He's smart. He's intelligent. He's been here the whole time. That's one that I wouldn't lose too much sleep over. Because trust me, I looked in the insider inbox submissions already. People already are.
Yeah, he's a 6-year veteran, and yes, he needs to get acclimated to this offense, et cetera, et cetera. But there'll be plenty of practices in training camp to do that, even if he can't get out there full speed.
And if you want to know why you need to pay attention to hamstring injuries and why you have to be cautious with them, just replay the 2023 Packers season.
Yes, exactly, 100%. You already mentioned where things are with Christian Watson and Eric Stokes. They look great out there. They both seem to feel pretty good about what they're able to learn on the trip to Madison, about their bodies, about things that they can do because of the construct of their bodies, some of the extra things they need to do that maybe other guys don't need to do in terms of protecting those hamstrings, protecting some of the soft tissue stuff, and preparing those parts of their bodies for the rigors of an NFL season. So hopefully they can put that information to good use, and hopefully it's the information that they need.
I know Lawrence University had a really high-tech sports science program when you were there playing baseball. But I learned, kind of like, unfortunately, when all the neck injury things were happening in the early 2010s, I learned so much about cervical fusions and all that type of stuff and herniated discs. I have learned so much about hamstrings over the last year, from the degrees of the tears to, and this is why he was the stand-up guy award winner with Aaron Jones last year, Christian Watson. He was incredible, to the best of his knowledge, as a guy who's not actually a doctor, of explaining everything he went through this offseason and what they were trying to get to. The biggest thing, trying to make this in the easiest digestible terms for fans to understand, is it's about symmetry and the strength of the two legs. There's the Nord board. There's different tests you can do that basically give you tangible, objective data to show you the strength in the two, the difference between the two. And much like if you have a sprained ankle and you're trying to walk around, you're going to put more pressure on the healthy one to compensate. The same thing with hamstring injuries. And as Christian Watson learned at the end of last season, there was some asymmetry going on there with his two hamstrings, with his two legs, which they believe it was part of the reason this was causing this and having some of the setbacks with it. He actually had a really interesting comment about with this Nord board, which is you basically lock your ankles in, you lean forward almost in a push-up position. It stretches your hamstrings. It shows you all that data. But he said he's actually really had a good time with it because it shows him every week. I mean, sometimes, remember when Rodgers had the collarbone? How does it feel this week? Does it look like it's improving? You can really see the degrees and percentages of how the hamstring is improving and strengthening and how you're getting the balance between the two. That's what he's trying to achieve right now. We haven't had a chance to talk to Eric Stokes, but it sounds like that also worked wonders for him. This is a big emphasis for the NFL, Mike. It's not just the Packers. The NFL put a lot of money and resources. A part of that was into Badger athletic performance in the UW of Wisconsin. And Packers took advantage of it. I take my hats off to them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see where things go from here. The negative news on the injury front was we found out that both right tackle, offensive lineman Zach Tom, and second-year tight end Tucker Kraft, they tore pectoral muscles during at some point during the strength and conditioning, like the weightlifting stuff that they were doing before the off-season program got to this point with the OTAs. So both of those guys are out for the rest of the off-season. They're targeting to get them back in training camp as they recover from the surgery and the rehab and everything that they have to go through. The hope is that they can be ready for the start of training camp. If not the start of training camp, then partway through training camp. And with that, what we saw on the offensive line with Zach Tom not out there and looking at kind of the first unit and the depth chart and stuff, we saw initially Andre Dillard, the free agent acquisition, was the guy lining up at right tackle with the number one unit, which then also included left to right was Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, Sean Ryan, and then Dillard. But we also saw a lot of shuffling and moving around going on because we saw Jordan Morgan, the first-round draft pick, was taking snaps at both left tackle and at right tackle. We saw Royce Newman stepping in to take some snaps at guard in place of Sean Ryan. We saw Elton Jenkins moving over and taking some snaps at center. A lot of, even with Zach Tom not out there right now, there's a lot of this figuring out the best five kind of thing going on, even at this stage without the pads on. And I think it's going to be something to watch even more so, I think, in training camp, and especially when Zach Tom does come back from the pec injury. just as to how this Packers offensive line is going to shape up.
This is what I always refer to as the ground beef portion of an NFL player's career. You know you got something good there, but you don't know if it's going to be a hamburger. You don't know if it's going to be taco meat. You don't know what you're going to do with this yet. You could have stuffed peppers. My dad makes wonderful stuffed peppers.
Yeah, those are good. Yeah,
spaghetti and meatballs.
There you go.
Whatever you want to do with it, it's there for you. And that's what Green Bay was doing when they drafted Jordan Morgan. He wants to play left tackle. He believes he can play left tackle. The Packers believe he can play left tackle. But he's also a rookie entering the National Football League. You have a veteran in Rasheed Walker now that played 851 snaps at left tackle last season. You have Zach Tom there, who's not currently there. You have Andre Dillard, who's a former first-round pick. This is the time of the year where it benefits you to be able to get reps at right tackle, because that may be where you ultimately are needed. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but that may be at some point where you have to be play.
Sure.
You might have to be at left tackle. The Packers have done this, and it was one of the biggest points of emphasis I made in inbox this morning was they have done such a good job of rotating guys around, sometimes even in regular season games, even in games themselves. But they've done such a good job of cross-training guys, and it's always been a point of emphasis. It's not something that just started when Matt LaFleur got here. Mike McCarthy and James Campen did plenty of it too. But it's the way in which they've done it, in the confidence and composure that players have shown once they've been put in those positions. Zach Tom is an excellent talent. Elton Jenkins is an excellent talent. As good as they are, and as well as I believe they'd fit into any offense in the National Football League, the way the Packers developed them also has something to do with how they were able to wear as many hats as they did. Jordan Morgan is in that phase right now. I think he's embracing it. I think he's looking forward to it. And honestly, Michael, it doesn't matter if you're at left tackle, right tackle, or fullback. If you're getting reps with the number one offense and you're in there with Jordan Love, that is a good thing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see a constant evolution of the depth chart. Perhaps when we get to training camp, it might even be on a day-to-day basis. You know, when you've got all this lead up, you have this lead up time before the pads go on, then the pads go on, then you get to family night, and then you're going to get to the preseason games. We could see this constant rotation as far as the coaching staff figuring out just who those best five are going to be and what the best unit, what the best group is going to be to put out there in front of Jordan Love, as well as then lining things up. Okay, who's the sixth man, who's the seventh, and who's the eighth? Because you're going to have, on game day in the regular season, you're going to have 8 offensive linemen active, and so there is going to be a cutoff there between the guys who should be expecting to play and other guys who are going to be on the 53, but they're going to be fighting to get on that game day roster as opposed to being a game day inactive. So long way to go here to figure that out. But it's going to be interesting to watch, and hopefully Zach Tom gets back out there sometime late July, early August.
Yeah, you definitely you hope that for Tom, because he was so good last year and he put more muscle onto his body. He got a little bit bigger and he played so well at a position that I think so many people question whether or not that would be his real home. And we still really don't know long term where he's going to line up.
Right.
But I am remembered of that second week of training camp last year where he was working at left tackle, right tackle, and if you remember, he even rotated in with center with Josh Myers for a little bit as well. The guy really can do everything, so trying to get him back in the lineup is going to be huge. But ultimately, unfortunately, when someone's not available, much like Ben Sims, we saw Ben Sims running deep corner routes during practice, and he was mostly a blocking tight end last year because it was him and Luke Musgrave were basically the two guys available because of Kraft's injury and because Tyler Davis isn't practicing yet. So there's so many different things that happen, but if you're out there and they call your number, you have to show them what you can do with it.
Yeah. One other piece of news to get to, in case you didn't hear, Matt LaFleur did confirm in his post-practice news conference on Tuesday that the Packers are going to have joint practices with 2 different teams upcoming here in training camp. The trip to Denver in the preseason, the Packers will go out a little bit early, have one practice with the Broncos prior to the preseason game, and then when the Baltimore Ravens come to Green Bay for the preseason finale, the Ravens and the Packers will have a joint practice prior to that preseason matchup. So that's just going to be, that alone is going to be interesting because of the Lamar Jackson, Jair Alexander, the whole Louisville connection thing. I think every not only professional photographer, but amateurs like the rest of us with our camera phones on the sideline, we're going to be trying to get that shot of Alexander and Jackson, the Louisville guys, like together on the practice field here in Green Bay.
Ja thinks so highly of Lamar, and
Absolutely.
I know I've talked on Inbox before, and I've also, I think, even mentioned on the show when they've played the Ravens. I mean, you go back and watch when he got drafted, when Lamar got drafted in 2018, and it just so happened that Jair was in the middle of an interview at that time. He stops everything to watch that television when Lamar gets picked number 32 overall and goes to Baltimore. The amount of pride that he showed, and I don't want to put words into Jair's mouth, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that both of those guys are guys that were kind of questioned at every turn. Jair, because he was lightly recruited, wasn't a 5-star recruit by any means. He goes to Louisville, proves himself to be a first-round player. Lamar Jackson, Heisman Trophy type player, and then everybody's asking if he's going to play receiver in the National Football League. And he's certainly proven that he's an MVP quarterback in this league. And it's always cool. And I like the adjustment they made too, Mike, going to one practice. I don't know how you felt about it last year in Cincinnati. It wasn't as bad in Green Bay, but that second day at Cincinnati, like there was a point in that practice.
It got ugly. There's no
like,
two ways about
here?
it. That second practice in Cincinnati got ugly, and there was very little that was accomplished because
Joe Burrow wasn't practicing.
Yeah, guys were just getting under each other's skin, and there was one stretch, and I think you were on the other practice field. We had to kind of divide duties when we were there in Cincinnati on the two different practice fields where everybody was. And the side that I was on was where a lot of the scuffling was going on. And I want to say it was something like 4 consecutive 11-on-11 plays where there was some kind of extracurricular going on that they had to separate guys before they could run the next play. I mean, it got to the point of ridiculousness, quite frankly, where what was getting accomplished was minimal, if anything, from a practice and a workout standpoint. So, yeah, the back-to-back joint practices, at least for this year, not happening. It's going to just be one against each of those teams prior to the preseason.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, too, how that affects the mentality and what the Packers want to do in terms of their starters in these games. As it turned out, Packers, Jordan Love played quite a bit last year. The starting offense played quite a bit with him last year. Still a young team. I get that. Understand why you'd want to be, getting those reps in. Denver should be interesting. It's an uncommon trip for us. We don't make it that often. Certainly a new staff and feel to that team right now with Sean Payton taking things over.
A little longer time for us to get acclimated to the altitude and all that out there, and more so for the players, obviously, with getting to practice once out there, especially for the young guys that are going to be playing in that game. They get a day on the practice field up there in the mountains in that kind of altitude before they're going all out in a game trying to win a roster spot.
This should feel a little less like The Shining, though. Last year, by the time we were done, I was like, all right, I'm ready to go back to Green Bay. It was a cool bonding experience. We're at the hotel quite a bit. We got a lot of work done, but by the end of it, I was like, all right. Because I never had experienced that, the traveling to go do. I remember back in the day when I first started covering the team, I was like, their training camp's always going to be in Green Bay. And it was a very different flavor going down to Cincinnati for those 3 days or whatever we were there for.
We went there. I mean, the game was on. The game was on like a Friday night, and then I think we flew to Cincinnati on like Monday or something like that.
Tuesday night, and they practiced Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, I forget how that went.
I can't remember how, but it was. We were in Cincinnati for a long time.
I had Skyline Chili for the first time.
Yeah, well,
I also sang karaoke with like a 65-year-old woman at like 2 a.m. one of those nights too. Yeah, that happened. Ryan Hartwig can tell you all about that.
Yeah, I don't stay out late with you guys on those nights, and now I know why. But
you want to end the show on that?
Well, before we go, we do have to tip our hat and express our gratitude. Our producer, Justin Allen, who has been producing this show. We were trying to figure it out for sure. We're thinking it's right around 18 months or so. It was sometime during the 2022 season. He took over as the producer of Packers Unscripted. This is his last show. He is moving on to hopefully bigger and better things. And just want to say, Justin, thank you, my man. Can't tell you how much we appreciate. I mean, people don't know. We've gone through different phases of the technology that we use in terms of how he communicates with us through the headsets. We've had these little remote things. We've had our cell phones. We've done it through the computer, through the tablet thing here. he makes it as seamless as possible for us. And so we just have to say thank you to him. Hopefully bigger and better is ahead, and we're going to miss you, my friend.
Yeah, and Justin, to give the guy the ultimate tip of the cap, I mean, you think about when we were doing, so COVID happens. That was fun. It wasn't. We do the renovations to the studio.
Right.
So we have to start moving. We have to start going remote. Well, then people start coming back in the building. We're still not having access to the studio because some of the changes. So Justin was the one having to actually get the carts out, get our microphones, get everything, get us set up on the 5th floor of Lambeau Field so we could do the show through Zoom in basically the suite area. Every once in a while, if you guys watch back then, there'd be a person that was like doing house cleaning and things after games because of just our setup. And Justin was the one that was putting in the miles, putting in the legwork on that. Incredibly talented young man. If you could just do the transcript of this or attach an audio file or video file to resumes going forward, I will speak as highly as him as any of our interns that have been here, because the thing about our interns in our operation, Mike, is you were saying you can't really remember. Well, because they just get thrown into the fire.
Yeah.
And they just have to deal with it. I can't think of one time where you and I have had to like restart the show because Justin pushed the wrong button or did the wrong thing. He is A1 across the board, and we are going to desperately, desperately miss him.
Yeah. All right. Well,
in the best way possible.
Yes.
We love you, Justin.
Yes, we love you, Justin. With that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Because of Justin's departure and some other things that are going on with the schedule next week, we're actually going to take 1 week off from the show. So next week, we won't have any shows, but then we will be back for a couple of more weeks as the OTAs and the mandatory minicamp and whatnot finish up the off-season program. So we're going to take just a little mini short break, and then we'll be back with more OTA coverage coming up here soon enough. So with that, for Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.